Hello, I'm Murray Herbst, Director of Entrepreneurship for UTS. At UTS, we have a program called UTS Startups that inspires and supports technology-enabled entrepreneurs. You're watching the UTS Startups channel. On this channel, you'll see incredible workshops from different parts of UTS for entrepreneurs that are normally only available to students. You'll see people that work with thousands of entrepreneurs sharing their observations and tips. And most importantly, you'll hear entrepreneurial confessions from amazing entrepreneurs about what actually enabled them, what they actually did, and what they actually got. If that sounds like the kind of thing you want to hear, hit subscribe. And if this video helps you along the way, or you think it might help others, like it and please share. So I think entrepreneurship is misunderstood. And I think it's misunderstood because entrepreneurs write books 30 years after they've done something, and it's a kind of idealized version of what they remember of what happened. Or they don't share anything at all. And I think for people that are starting out, not seeing that true story behind entrepreneurs is a limiting factor. And I think when people say, I don't know where to start, it's because people aren't sharing the truth behind what's enabling them as entrepreneurs. So I'm incredibly excited today. It's scary to say this, but probably my favorite entrepreneur of all time, Anna Wright from BindiMaps, has agreed to be bravely guinea pig number one in this series. Welcome, Anna.
Thanks, Murray, and now you've just embarrassed me.
So we're going to have some fun. To kick off, Anna, tell me who you were before you started BindiMaps.
Before I started BindiMaps, I had a sort of two-faced role. I was a senior lecturer in the accounting group at UTS, and I was also, I had a consulting practice as a valuations specialist. So very boring.
Nothing wrong with working at UTS. It's a wonderful place.
Oh no, UTS is fine. It was the accounting part I was thinking about.
Oh, it's boring when it's running well. I will say I didn't introduce BindiMaps on purpose because I want to get into that now. What are your earliest memories of the BindiMaps idea? Where did the idea for BindiMaps come from?
So the very earliest memories or thoughts around where BindiMaps started, which was a very different business to what it ended up being. But I had this thing about Braille in public places, and I challenge everyone. There's a little bit of a sort of a Twitter sub-community on Braille fails. But my question was always, if you're blind, how are you supposed to know that the Braille is there? Just as a general, if you think about it from a user experience point of view, are you supposed to go around Central Station with your fingers along the walls, going up and down until you manage to find the sign that actually says that that's the female or male bathrooms? It's not a very good sort of user experience. So that was a frustration of mine, and it stemmed from the fact that I was diagnosed with a retinal condition that means that I should lose my sight. I haven't yet, but at the time they thought it would go a lot faster. The sight loss would work a lot faster. So it was when I was being introduced to things like Braille. This is going to help you when you're, going around. Like, ow. It's ridiculous. So yeah, there's some great Braille fails. So one of my favorites is actually at UTS, the disabled bathrooms at UTS. I'm going to call them out. They've got the occupied and vacant signs, and there's Braille underneath it that says occupied and vacant, but the indicator for occupied and vacant is a green light and a red light.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very, they're not warmer or cold. Go give it a whirl. Tell me if you, apart from, so if you ever are using a disabled bathroom and there's somebody rattling on the door, then don't get angry at them. They might just not be able to see that the red light's on.
Okay, so that's good. I'm putting myself in your shoes back then. Obviously, a terrifying thing to know that this is coming, and to look around and see a world that is not designed to make this an easier thing, or as easy as it deserves to be. How did you come to start to think of actually doing something about that?
Well, that was a very long process. And I would be the person that's constantly saying this is ridiculous. Somebody should do something about it. Somebody should do something about it.
The UTS to fix that. Someone will sort it out. Yeah.
Oh, I've already tried. Don't worry. So it was always this hard thing of why hasn't someone else fixed this already? And I think it was really just serendipity in that a friend who had heard me complain about Braille for so long saw that there was grant funding available through a program for people, non-technical founders. So my accounting background doesn't give me technical founder status. And so I put an entry in. I left it to the very last moment. I couldn't sleep one night. I was up at 4 a.m. and I was like, stuff it. I'm not going to get anywhere, but let's just put the entry in anyway. Somebody might see it and think it's a good idea and do it themselves, which would be awesome.
Okay. See, this is good. This is where the confessions part of this comes in, because you may not say this normally when you're talking about the company, but I think everyone has this kind of story about the kind of things, the kind of rocks rolling down the hill that end up being something incredible, but the rock at the start was whatever it was. Did you think at the time you were putting that application in that this was a potentially large, worthwhile thing to pursue?
Not at all. Not in the slightest. This is part of the confessions. We'll be honest right now. This is a confession. When I first put it in, I thought, okay, they're not going to pick me. But if they did, the first part of this process was a 2-week boot camp in entrepreneurship. And so I approached it as an academic. I'm going to go out to industry and I'm going to spend 2 weeks with industry experts learning about something. Awesome. And when I got accepted into the 2 weeks, that's exactly how I approached it. I was like, these people are batshit crazy because they've chosen my idea. But I'm going to be here and I'm going to soak up as much as I can for the 2 weeks, and then I can use that back in my other life.
Do you think BindiMaps would be here today if they had not accepted you into that program?
I don't think it would have been here today. No, I think that was the. I think I would still be saying somebody else should be doing this, and then when somebody else does do it, then I'd probably be complaining that they still haven't thought about a solution for people who are blind, because there are similar solutions out there, but again, they're still all visual. As visual solvers, we think of everything visually. It seems to be quite difficult for people to do that proper universal design.
Okay, so that I'll take as ingredient number one to the early success, because this is something I like about what we do in UTS Startups too, that the just signing up to something, I find with a lot of people, it actually gets them starting to work on something, and not through any genius on our part, but this encouraging them to continue allows their kind of genius to manifest itself in that direction rather than another direction. If there was a kind of recipe of those ingredients to your early success, what do you think that recipe would include outside of that program?
Being brave and asking people, especially so very early on, I started trawling LinkedIn, as lots of entrepreneurs do, and I just looked for anyone that I knew or I sort of knew that knew anyone that worked for Guide Dogs or Vision Australia, because I wanted to, I'm always there going, Braille's stupid, but I thought, like, well, have I actually spoken to anyone who's blind? So very early on, I managed to get a couple of meetings with different and very general. Like that's the other thing was when you actually put it out there and say this is what I'm trying to do, and I'd like your help. People will be very generous with their time. And that's what I discovered is that then I had these conversations with people at Blind Citizens Australia, at Guide Dogs and vision, like actual proper people with vision impairment, and asking them about their journeys and how they use Braille in public spaces. And so that was a big thing because it was validation that I wasn't just complaining. It was actually a legitimate pain point for people. So that was important. They said that it would be good and it would work. But then on the other side, you always get all the people that tell you it's a really dumb idea. Even the head of the head engineer that I had via Blue Chili didn't think we'd ever be able to solve the tech. So that was comforting early on.
Okay, so you have.
Yeah, we have. That might just be because we're a bit stubborn.
Did you find people saying something wasn't possible pushed you to prove that it was?
Yeah, I'm a bit like that.
I think a lot of people are. I was tempted at one point to have an accelerator program that rejected 100% of applications just as an impetus for people to continue working on whatever they were working on and prove that program wrong. I think it would have a non-zero improvement on people's startups.
Hard to prove.
Yeah.
Thesis on that one.
I'm confessing things I shouldn't be.
Good.
But on the technology angle, I love technology-enabled entrepreneurship. We're in 2021. We're in a pandemic. We're both in our homes. Were there technologies that made BindiMaps possible at the time, now, that didn't exist previously?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just trying to think through it. The hardware components that we use existed already, but not me, the algorithms that had to be put in place. But then, especially early on, when we couldn't get the accuracy to localize somebody in space, we had to rely, and it was really quite creative, and it's what I really enjoyed, was on how can you locate somebody in space using other things. So we would talk to people with vision impairment, so through the app, like you're going to walk down a corridor and go past the elevators on your right, and then it meant that if the localization was a little bit off, they would still be able to work that out. It's like, oh yeah, I can hear I know that I'm coming up to elevators and they're right there, I can hear them. The app says that I'm somewhere else, but they ignored the app and they knew to ignore the app. Or say you're coming up to stairs, be careful, and because there's the tactiles on the stairs, they would know that the stairs were there. So we could sort of fluke it. Is that the right word? But work around, like use a little bit of chewing gum and sticky tape to make the solution work.
Well, I think that sounds appropriate. If mobile phones were not what they were 20 years ago, and we're reaching the point at that stage that you could localize, but only to a certain extent, and it wasn't super whatever it needed to be. But you knew that it's going to get better over the next couple of years, then having a kind of good enough solution with an eye of turning that into what it is today sounds pretty perfect.
Yeah. And also, I wouldn't say that where we're at now is where we're going to be in another 6 months or another year. We want to get away from the hardware completely. So we're always thinking like what might be. And it's a really interesting space because, like you said, with phones, we don't know what Apple or Samsung are thinking about including. So I don't know if you would know this, Muzz, but the most recent iPhones have got ultra wideband in them, but we don't know if they're going to continue with that. So do we build for ultra wideband, or are they going to adopt the next Bluetooth standard, which will have directional beacons in it, or not? So we're having to explore all of these different possibilities with trying to guess what the phone companies are going to be doing in the future, which is fun.
And think about that for a second, because who would have thought in 2016, was it, when BindiMaps started?
The very end of 16, yeah.
That you would be as deep on this kind of sensor technology as you are now. And maybe if you knew what you would need to understand, you would say, no, I'm not going to address this problem. I'll leave it for other people. But by having that commitment device, getting accepted, having the external validation, having LinkedIn available and your professional network and the LinkedIn network to start getting feedback and getting positive and negative reinforcement from different places, you now end up knowing all the things you do and seeing the opportunity that no other entrepreneur out there would be seeing at the moment.
I was a very naive entrepreneur. Sorry, I had to ask somebody what UX meant.
For people at home?
User experience.
Okay.
Everyone talks about it and puts their little post-it notes. Back in the days, we could talk to each other face to face, but they'll talk about UX and get all the different coloured post-it notes and write weird things on them and stick them up on whiteboards. And I'm like, what are you doing? What is this thing?
Okay, so it's developing. You're starting to prove the technology is working. How did you get the early growth of BindiMaps?
So we have a two-sided marketplace. So the app is free for the users. So we have to try and attract users on the one side, and then our customers are the building owners. So I think because we were working initially, now everybody can use BindiMaps, but initially because we were working for people who are blind or vision impaired, and because, again, as time has gone on, we have a better acceptance of people with disability and needing to be inclusive in the way that we design things. We got early customers because of their diversity and inclusion plays, and I'll actually call out Stockland because they were amazing. We were a little tiny startup. There were only 3 of us at the time, and Stockland signed us to do an entire shopping centre for them, which we all knew that was just a pilot, but they actually paid for it. So more power to them. And it was all about them wanting to engage with their community. They knew that around Wetherill Park there were quite a few people with vision impairment. So then what we did to then engage the users is that I used my best friends at Guide Dogs and Vision Australia and Blind Citizens Australia to organise for people with vision impairment to come to the shopping centre to do a big day out. So we had a Stockland threw some money, some gift vouchers and things, and we had a really fun day with all these people with vision impairment running around using their vouchers and trying out BindiMaps. So yeah, it sort of grew from there.
How did you meet the person from Stockland?
That's my brilliant co-founder, Maladan. he's very good at engaging and re-engaging and re-engaging with people together. But again, it was a little bit of serendipity because about a year before, Stockland had worked with Vision Australia and Microsoft to try and come up with a BindiMap solution. Vision Australia had given them all the data around their communities and how many people with low vision or blindness were near their different shopping centres. And then they went to Microsoft to ask them to try and build a solution for them, which Microsoft quoted enormous amounts of money, which of course, and no guarantee of success. And then, a year later, they got the right person in Stockland, got Maladan's email and was able to put it together going, oh my goodness, well, we were just talking about this over here and now we've had this here, and this solution is a fraction of the price. And it's actually an actual solution. So they came out we had a test site at UTS. They came out and had a go at it at UTS. They spoke to people at Guide Dogs and went from there.
Okay, so that's the re-engagement paying off when someone has a problem at that time.
Yes.
Okay, so that's just wonderful as well, that you have a perfect solution waiting there, and there are companies out there that care about the right things and recognize the opportunity in fixing this problem, and you're there ready to go when they are. Had you raised funding at that point?
Yes, we had a small sort of FFF or pre-seed round. We had we raised 100 grand, and then we had the New South Wales government MVP grant. So that was enough to put together this. That was the pilot site at UTS. So fairly nasty, more of a proof of concept than an actual pilot. But from that proof of concept, I could go out, and then we did a $1 million seed round with the proof of concept and just kept going from there.
Okay, because it must make that fundraising a lot easier when you can show there's Stockland and other places that are ready to go wanting this kind of solution. Did you find
fundraising is fundraising is always just really hard, that. I think it was a combination. It was that, yes, we had a customer ready and interested and paying, which is always a good thing. It was also, we had the validation from the advocacy groups. I think that was also really important. And then it was also the type of investors that I talked to, who were all very keen on that equity and diversity and inclusion piece, and wanted their money to be doing something good, as well as something that was going to be commercially successful. So I think those were the three bits that had to go into the pot to get the $1 million seed round.
Okay. Do you think that helped the fundraising, being able to say that there's not just a large financial return in the traditional investment sense, but there's a large impact on people that need it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but that I would always lead with the why we are doing it, and then back up why that's a good investment with the numbers.
Okay. On that point, so it's been almost 5 years since BindiMaps started. What does BindiMaps look like today?
It's a bit of a bigger beast. It's still a very small team. We've got 12 full-time people and 2 sort of part-timers that come in and help out. So it's still a relatively small team. But I'd say the biggest growth has been in the product. So both from the sort of the algorithm that works behind it to get the actual apps to work, through to the UX that I finally know what that means, in the app interfaces. But then also, we've got data dashboards, we've got other. We've got a fully built our own CMS. We've got algorithms that run in the cloud to check how well our hardware is working remotely. So and I'm probably sorry, devs, I'm selling them short on all of the bits and pieces, but we've gone from this little tiny thing where Maladan and Tony, my other co-founder, and I would go out, and Ben, my son, would come and help us stick beacons up at Stockland shopping centres, to actually having staff whose job is to do this and then look after the customers, and it feels more like a real business now. rather than just something like we were all running around like the proverbial headless chook trying to keep everything going.
12 staff is incredible, 12 full-time plus the casual. There must be a decent number of properties around the place where you're now deploying this and helping people not have to seek out broken brow signs.
Yes. Well, we extended the product. In the beginning, we had very nasty map interfaces, and we could get away with that because we'd tell people it's not for you. It's entitled sighted person. It's for people who are blind, so they don't care what the maps look like. But we had to give that away, and so we've now got proper maps, so they pan and tilt, and you can zoom in and pinch and pull the same way as you can on Google Maps or Apple Maps. We went from doing just indoors to be able to do indoors and outdoors. So when you're around somewhere like Wynyard Station in Sydney, or even through some parts around Central Station, the buildings are too close together to get a really good GPS signal to know exactly where you are. So we can solve all of that. So yeah, we extended the offering. So we work for people who are sighted and non-sighted. We've got wheelchair accessible routing. We're currently working on autism spectrum routing. So we just keep building and building, which is fun.
Okay, so from the kind of late night application to now something that is potentially changing indoor navigation completely, and is changing.
I hope
has
so.
Already changed. Okay.
It's sort of, yeah, it sounds pretty naff when we just talk about indoor navigation, but it can actually, for people with a disability, it can make a really big impact in their lives. So when you're talking about letting somebody have a full-time job, if you're disabled and you have a tertiary education, you're 60% more likely to have a full-time job with that tertiary education. So to be able to help people navigate indoors is going to make such a big, for you and me, it's convenient. So I don't like losing my car in the shopping centre. So I'll drop a pin on my car in BindiMaps, and then I'll go and do my shopping and I can find my car again. I mean, first world problems when we're allowed to go shopping. But for somebody who's blind to be able to go to university and study and then go and get a job and not be dependent on government handouts, that's, it's fantastic. It's life-changing for them, but it's also great for society in general. And I know that you're just a big believer in diversity and inclusion as well, but there's some amazing people out there with vision impairment who's I think we need to have them more into these discussions around the way our world should be. So, for example, there's a great friend of BindiMaps who's completely blind, so no light sensitivity whatsoever. He works for NASA identifying new planets from sound waves. As the planets go past the stars in the solar system, I can't hear it, but he can, and his team of helpers who are all blind or vision impaired can hear it. But to take that sort of problem solving to something like we go, oh, you need to find new planets. Of course, we're going to look for them. That's just the way that you and I would solve it. But when we can start to include all these people with different skills and different ways of dealing with the world, then I think we're going to solve a lot more problems in a lot more creative ways. So that's what I'm excited about. We're taking, it's sort of in a way, like I said, a naff little wayfinding thing, but what that can mean to everybody.
I just love that out there's, or through this camera, there are some investors that said no 4 or 5 years ago that are now deeply regretting that.
Well, if they are, we're about to launch our Series A, so you can hop on board the Series A at a very different price to what they would have paid 5 years ago. But yeah,
the apology price.
Well, but the cheaper price than the Series D will be.
Exactly. This is incredible. So BindiMaps has grown to where it is today. I want to ask a more personal question about you, Anna. What have you grown to today as a result of being an entrepreneur? How has it changed you?
I think it's made me a lot more risk taking, in that I used to, and I think it's important as an accountant, when you're dealing with people's money and taxes, that you need to have a certain level of surety that you've actually done it right, so that, you know, people don't lodge a tax return on your advice and then get into trouble from the tax office. So that sort of whole idea that everything should be 100% right before going out to the client. And it was very much, you know, I would do it, then my supervisor would check it, and then their supervisor would check it. In entrepreneur land, we don't work like that. It's like throw something together and throw it out there and see what people think, and take that feedback. And they are the review process. So I think that's made me I'm much more open to, oh, look, it broke. Let's learn from that, rather than, you know, rocking in a corner because it wasn't 100% right when it went out. So I'd say that's the biggest change for me, is that not needing to be perfect every time before something goes out. Yeah.
I think a lot of people could learn that. Are there skills you've picked up that you never thought you would need to pick up, or pick up otherwise?
Absolutely. When I was doing that whole academic thing, all of my reading, all of my focus was around my professional stuff. All I've done, I mean, I still do a lot of reading, read heaps of books, but now it's much wider. And it's things like UX, or around the way your brain works, or one book that I've just finished reading, which is awesome. If you haven't read it, it's called Why We Sleep. And it's basically a summary of all of the sleep science. Absolutely fascinating. So yeah, I think I've broadened my worldview.
Okay.
Plus I've made some awesome new friends in the blind and vision impaired community.
That's the thing. I like the reasons that entrepreneurship gives you to do things you wouldn't otherwise do. And you're always going to be the worst you'll ever be at anything you try to do, until you start to figure it out once you have the reasons to. But it gives people a reason to start to figure things out. So my last question, this has been amazing. Looking back, what advice would you give Anna in 2016 and any other aspiring entrepreneurs that are out there?
I would probably say just go for it. You're going to go for it, but just go for it, and know that the universe has got your back. And just try. I think, like we were saying, a lot of people wait until it's perfect, and then somebody else will do it, and they go, "Damn it, that's my idea." That's too easy. When everybody's full of good ideas, I've got plenty of more startup ideas. It's just whether or not I'm going to have the time to be able to do them. So, but now I'm much more like, let's just throw it out there. Go and start asking people if your idea is a good one, or if this is actually a problem that needs solving. So I would say that's what I would say to another person that's thinking about it. Just start. Do something. Okay. Get started. Go and talk to Murray at UTS Startups. Get started.
Put in that application.
Put in that application.
Think of where you'd be today if not for that. It'd be somewhere else amazing, but this is...
I don't know that my if anyone walks past that's one of my ex-students, I'd be still lecturing students. I love students. They're always so much fun. That is one thing that I miss, is talking to those students that are really engaged in what they're doing. But now I get to do other stuff, which is just as fun.
And they can watch you on this instead. Anna, I
Thank
look forward to the future autobiography where you say this was you're standing on a mountaintop and were struck by inspiration around how to replace Google Maps and all the other indoor mapping technologies with a new solution that actually works everywhere and is inclusive and enabling for everyone. But for now, thank you for sharing those insights, those confessions, and being guinea pig number one. I hope the people at home have enjoyed that. I'll also say for anyone watching, if you want to see more content like this, please hit subscribe. If you've liked this or think it might help others, hit like and share it with other people. And thank you very much. Anna.
you.